No, I said, well, the reason I was in the impression is because Lloyd and I saw that there. I'm not gonna get in front of him anyway, so you could participate.
You didn't.
Because.
Well, we can count on
I have 6:30.
All right, we're gonna call this meeting to order.
6:30.
Just so that we are able to all understand kind of what the concept here is. If you have an agenda in front of you, I'm going to kind of walk through it so you know what we're going to do. So, the roll call is pretty straightforward. The open forum that we have on the agenda here, that is an open forum for public comment. If you look down below that, we have a council appointment, which we're hoping to do very shortly here, and we want to do the council appointment before we move on to the budget and levy conversation. So at the budget and levy conversation level, we will have another opportunity for public comment. That's for public comment referring directly to the budget and levy information, which is included in the packet as well. Mary's going to get more information for that, or more copies for that if you want, but in the meantime, we have a couple copies floating around you can share. So, does everybody get that? Does that make sense? So the first public comment is just general public comment. The second one is for the budget and levy conversation. Okay? All right, roll call shows that we've got all the councilors that we currently have. And now is the time for the open forum. So if anybody has anything they'd like to say that's not directed to the budget and levy. Got anything? Did you want to say anything? Say whatever you want. Okay. Just want to make sure that's clear. Okay, last chance. Okay, closing the open forum, moving on to the consent agenda. So the consent agenda, no big surprises, original 3 things. Unless somebody would like to pull something for conversation, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I motion.
Motion.
Second.
Ooh, motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right, so moving on to E, right on time here. We have 2 applicants to fill 1 position for this for the vacated seat. We have Craig Schulte and Anna Hamilton. Both of them had a brief letter that they put into the packet for your consideration. I think that we have 2 outstanding candidates here. Open up for discussion if anyone has anything they'd like to say.
Just to start out with, I know in the past when we've had multiple candidates and they've been present, we've asked them to just kind of step forward and ask, kind of just explain why they want to serve and what their interest is, and maybe anything else that they might want to add. Just a short.
Does that work for you guys?
Little kind of.
Sure, I wasn't listening.
Mary.
That was, Mary can take responsibility
Sorry.
for that. So the suggestion was, if you're here, if you have a couple things that you want to say about why you're interested, you're definitely welcome to say that, just to help us, to help inform us better of what you're looking to do is. And since both of you are here, I don't know if you want to just take a minute and come and let us know what you know, or what the deal is. If you pass.
Come on up.
Well, I already spoke
Come on up.
at the W.
Ask them to come up.
Yeah, maybe we can hear you.
I already spoke at the interview, well, at the radio that night, a few weeks back, when they asked us why we wanted to serve, and, just basically, for me, it's just to get involved with the city function a little bit, since I live in the community, I've been involved in the past with planning and zoning, and I just feel that I'd like to serve some time on the city council to, put some of my effort into it, and, be part of the community a little bit more than just living here, running a business, so that's just an opportunity to serve is what I'd like to do. Bring a voice to with the people, bring a voice to the city.
Are there any things, Craig, that specifically interest you?
I'm interested in a lot of things that are going on in the city right now. Part of it is the highway project. Part of it is the expansion of the city hall, the planning that's going to go forth in those projects. I'm interested in being part of that, and other things that are on the agenda with perhaps the DNR boat launch area. That's a project coming up, I think, in the next few years. Otherwise, I'm not really informed with everything that's going on right now because I'm not a member of this council. But yeah, those things I'm interested in being part of and helping with.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good.
Go ahead, I guess.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
I essentially feel the same way that he does. However, I sold my business, so for the first time, I have time and my blood pressure is down, and I just would like to be involved as well. I'd like to put my money where my mouth is. I'm very opinionated, and I'd like to be able to maybe back it up a little bit. Also learn a few things. My interest is in the growth that's happening to our city. It's happening really fast, our county. I think some of that is wonderful. I've lived here long enough to see it go from a ghost town to not a ghost town many times of the year. I have a concern about how it's growing and how we're taking care of the growth. That's just a personal concern of mine. I also am very interested in the old ski hill property, and I have an opinion that I'd like to be able to interject somewhere. So whether it be here or in the newspaper, I'm gonna do it. So, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, any further discussion? I do think that I would like to point out as well that the fact that the results of the election, to me, kind of speak. They speak pretty clearly in one way, in that Craig, having been a very strong showing in the election as well, definitely says something, and having, put that intention forward at the beginning of the election, to me that says something about his intention to serve. I honestly, either way, I feel that both the candidates will provide a really good perspective on the council. So I don't know if anybody has any more discussion or strong feelings about either way.
I don't have strong feelings. I'm kind of torn both ways. I agree, and I think I've said at the meetings that Craig had a very strong showing, and was on the ballot and those things. I also like the fact, being that I'm the only female on the council, that it isn't even that, but
Yeah.
I feel sometimes, especially in small towns, we get into the good old boys club, and certainly none of us are really old anymore, but
Well,
That's right. I'm glad you recognize that.
I just think that there's oftentimes that women can be a voice for people. People tend to, I think people connect well with Anna. I know I've worked with Anna. I feel like I know Anna in those respects. So again, either way, I don't have an issue. I have a hard time choosing which route I want to go.
well, and this is not a new thing either. I mean, it's easy for me to follow a track of how the council would function with different candidates, and this is what happened when we selected Tracy to fill the position that was vacated by Jan, and that was I think we spent way too long in that conversation, kind of hawing and hemming over the choice. So you guys have any thoughts? What are your perspectives on this?
Well, at the last meeting, we had talked about just that issue of the conflict, with Craig, with, you're providing services to the city, and, that same situation that, came up with you, Pete, is gonna, come up with you, Craig, and I'm not sure really, how we address that, but,
I brought that up to Craig in an email, and he made it very clear that he doesn't hold any contracts
Right.
with the city, and so basically, if he was to serve on the council, then there would still be things we'd have to do, but it would basically it would be an affidavit saying that he did not set his own rates, and he did not set the policy of purchasing there. And plus, when you look at the price for fuel at all three of the gas stations in town is really comparable, and so then it doesn't, that conflict is not as, how did you put it? It's not as disparate because there's lots of examples of similarly priced service.
Well, it's a clear financial conflict of interest, but it's not a disqualifying one.
Right.
It's one that we can handle. It's one that he would have to disclose, and that every time we have a bill for fuel, we'd have to go through some extra process to deal with.
It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, and I asked him about it, he said
it?
he just wanted to do it.
I
so-
mean, we'll figure it out. I mean,
Right.
we know, we've got the appropriate legal advice on how to deal with it. It'll just be something we'll learn how to handle, and I think it'll be pretty fast eventually, but at first it might be a little awkward, and we do pay fuel bills fairly often, so
Yeah.
we'll get a lot of practice right away.
Yeah.
And if we ever decide then if we want, to go out and look for prices on fuel, that we'll have to figure that out too, but right now, I don't see us having to change any of the way that we're operating, so.
No, I would agree that, we can continue to do what we do, but, just to be clear with Craig, so that he understands that at some point down the line, we might choose to go out and get quotes or do bids or something on fuel that might change kind of where the status quo is. I think some of it is just the perception of when you have a council member that's directly doing business with the city, even though we may be able to technically get around that, whether or not that, that it appears, whether it appears at all that we're giving any preferential treatment. And we could remedy that. I mean, certainly we have to make those findings or qualifications when we would approve a bill, but we'd also have the opportunity at some point down the line too to clarify that too by getting quotes or, doing something different too.
I guess I'd say that I feel similar about Craig, the fact that, we ran against each other and that he showed interest early on and ran. I also know Anna, and I was excited to see that application. I will say that there is other places besides the newspaper to get involved. If you don't get on.
Right.
So with things, Sawtooth Bluff being a big one, I hope that, I hope that you participate here. And I think, again, I'd make a motion to appoint Craig Schulte for Resolution 2018-25. Again, only because, it's an impossible choice, really, but the fact that Craig was there and showed interest early on back in October or whenever we had to sign up.
Right.
So
Well, they
that's
they had
my,
to sign up in like July.
that's my
August.
August,
August,
whatever
yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
We got some, so there's a motion, is there a second? I can second it, I'll second it. And if any further discussion? Yeah, that's why I was wondering if you guys had anything first. You have something?
I was just gonna say, had I known that I was up against Craig, I probably wouldn't have ran because I kind of feel the same way too. I think he'd be great at this. It's not that I'm removing myself. I just fully support Craig Schulte being in this position.
Totally.
I do.
Cool. Well, thank you.
But I
for
think
that.
it's also important to know that, we appreciate, both of you stepping up to put your name, for consideration because, filling these positions is really important and, to have two, what I think are two well-qualified people step forward is good for the city. It's good for the city. And I know when we had our last appointment, we kind of went around the same conversation that, how do you not select somebody, but, we have to make a decision.
we gotta do
and we did.
something, yeah.
And, I think,
I'm not sure my rationale is fair, except for it's like, well, I can put that and rationalize that in my head, I guess, the fact that,
He is
so.
very fair. I do too.
yeah.
We also are going to have openings on some of our boards and different things after the new year now, right?
Yep.
That if Anna has interest in, I would definitely encourage you to do that because I think you have a lot to offer.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
Yeah, I'm all in.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve Craig Schulte to the vacancy via Resolution 2018-25. Any final comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Fantastic. So, Craig, I assume that Mike went over there to get a copy of the oath because you have to swear in, and then you can sit down, and then we'll get you a name tag, and then everything will be all good. Like, you just wanted one of these.
You just won that chair tonight.
Yeah, congratulations. And I think it
They're
goes
really
without
comfortable
saying.
chairs, much better than what the.
So I don't have to go back to work. I can actually.
You can, well, you could be at this meeting anyway.
That's the one question I was going to ask. Is Lynn going to cover for you on all?
Oh no!
On all?
Do you need to call her?
I was going to say,
I'll be a little bit longer.
Yeah,
we probably should have called Lynn and said, "Do you want Craig?"
yeah, exactly. That was. Can I phone a friend?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there he is. We're done. All right.
You have this memorized right now.
Thank you, Anna.
Okay, so you got to stand up and you got to get sworn in.
Thank
This is
you.
actually
Thank
like
you,
an
Anna.
official thing.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So you need to basically just like you raise your hand and then you read that.
You can go stand by. It's going to be real ceremony.
I don't know. Do you want me to stand by you, Craig, or no? I don't think we're taking a picture. I think you
I
can
was going to
just do
say, if
it.
he's going to do that, he has to take his hat off.
Oh, that's not. My hair is a
So what do you want
mess.
me to do? Raise my right hand.
Yep, and then you just read that, and then you're all set.
Okay. I, Craig Schulte, under penalties of law, do swear that I would support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Minnesota, and will faithfully discharge the duties of City Councilor for the City of Grand Marais to the best of my knowledge, judgment, and ability. Dated December 12, 2018.
Fantastic.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you, Craig.
Great. So the first thing you get to do as a counselor is sit in on the Truth and Taxation meeting.
You get a good
And you have to answer all questions. No.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So with that in mind, the budget and levy hearing here is it's a stipulation, a requirement that we have to do to disclose what our final levy is going to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a brief discussion of the historical levy moving into the current, and then the 2 years that we're anticipating into the future. All of this information is in the packet. If you're interested, grab it or look
There's
over.
extra copies.
There's
of
extra
the financial
copies of
stuff,
just the
too.
financials. Yep. And then following that little discussion, then open forum. Anybody can come up, 5 minutes a person, and then go from there. Capiche? Okay, take it away.
Great. Does everybody have enough paperwork to follow along here if they want to? We'll talk about the levy first because that's really the basis for this meeting. The proposed levy that the City Council is looking at right now is $959,021.32. That's a 2.72% increase over the 2018 levy. It consists of $612,593, which is general spending, general revenue, and a series of debt payments that total $346,428 that pay for infrastructure projects. You can see each of those individually listed on this sheet. That's the number. So where does it come from? The budget. You can see each department and what their 2018 budgeted total was, what their 2019 current budget for expenses, what their 2019 current budget for revenues are. And you can also see actual spending back to 2013. The top half of that spreadsheet includes things that are generally levy supported, included in what we call the general fund. The bottom half includes all the other activities that are happening in the city, some of which do have an effect on the levy. And then you can see the right-hand column is just adding up for each department how much they're either supporting the levy or being supported by the levy, and it totals up again to that $959,021. So where do we sit? With a multi-year look ahead, we started this in 2017. We looked at what we were going to do for 2018, but we also wanted to think about 2019 and 2020 and were we going to be able to support our projected activities at those times as well. So now we're looking at 2019. We're also looking at 2020 and 21, trying to think about, are we prepared for what we see coming in the future? First, I want to point out, you can see that our earlier projection for 2019 was pretty close to where we're at right now in terms of the levy, in terms of the increase. There's a couple of big differences, though. We thought we would have a larger revenue levy than we do. We also thought we would have additional rec park revenues that we'd be adding that we're not quite at. And we were considering also using some reserves to help smooth over the additional debt payments that were added for the Public Works garage. So rather than absorb that all in 1 year, spread the increase over a couple of years. As you can see in 2019, we're not going to do that. The revenue levy is actually reduced to make up for most of the increase in the debt levy. Is some additional rec park revenues that's built into this budget. We're not currently talking about using any reserves to support this budget. You look ahead into 2020 and 2021, these are assumptions. They're based on just simple escalators in terms of spending percentages, 3% in 2020, 2% in 2021. They're based on a pretty close estimate of what we know our debt payments are going to be, at least supported by the levy. And they're also talking about adding a new debt payment because the council's been talking about this building and the liquor store for a long time. We've been looking ahead to make sure that when those projects happen, we can do it with reasonable levy increases. And so you can see that that is indeed the case. Things are looking good, and for all the plans that the council's been talking about, we should be able to continue to have moderate levy increases and support those activities.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay, floor is open. Would I like to come forward and say their piece? Anybody? Anybody? If not, then last chance.
Oh, give them a minute.
Okay, then we will close the budget and levy hearing, and then we will continue to move along in our agenda for the night. Good. All right. So, G on your agenda is conversations about Highway 61. So the conversation about Highway 61 needs to take two different tacks for tonight. The first tack is the Creative Economy Collaborative memo that they sent us, which is included in your packet. This is a conversation about the amenities that are included in the project. The council gave direction to the Creative Economy Collaborative to work on some design and affirmation or suggestions for how the amenities work within the project itself, and this is their response. So briefly, I think the important thing for us to remember with this memo is that this is a suggestion that they have made, kind of an affirmation of our affirmation of what the plans developed by CJ have been. The CEC is also working with CJ on some actual designs for amenities for the Highway 61 project, and those ideas are not ready yet. So this is mainly what we need to go through, and is basically just acknowledge what they've said. And there's not a ton of conversation that needs to be done about it at this point, because we don't have the designs yet, and we don't know exactly where those designs will be going. So with that said, I'd be glad to wander through this and explain a little bit of what each of the elements are talking about. But really, the majority of the conversation tonight is the budget part of Highway 61, which is there's about 4 pages of that in your packet as well. That conversation, we have to really take a deep look at what the local participation in the project is going to be, and what we feel comfortable with those levels being set at. And I'll say a little bit more about that when we get to that. But going through the Highway 61, the Creative Economy Collaborative memo, they have an introduction that says basically what we already know, which is that we said, hey, you guys work on this. In the concept design, they're talking about having contemporary Scandinavian design elements and also elements of our history reflected in the design for the corridor. What exactly that means, what they have here is durability, beauty, simplicity, minimalism, functionality, and natural forms are the things that they identified. And I think that that's a good way to explain most people who live in Grand Marais. Durable, beautiful, simple, minimal. Anyway, sorry. Funny jokes are not, this is not the time or place for funny jokes.
That was during the truth and taxation.
Truth, yeah, there you go. Fair enough. Oof, ouch. Oh, it hurts. The next conversation is about streetlights. They acknowledge that the lighting must meet MnDOT standards. This is something that we have also been working with MnDOT on developing where the lights have to be in order for there to be pedestrian scale lighting that meets MnDOT standards. The design for the street lighting there's a number of street light designs that are being considered, and we will have an opportunity to see those at a future meeting. Trees and plants. Having trees on the corridor is a priority, and so that's something that was made very clear by the community as well as by just about every group that we've talked to about the corridor itself. They're talking about salt-tolerant trees. They're talking about a mixture of trees that have different lifespans so that we don't have all the trees dying at the same time. And having specific different plants and different planters and things like that throughout the corridor and having those identified. Not sure exactly who's going to be identifying what plants those are. I think that CJ is going to, again, bring forward recommendations for that. 10 or 11 benches throughout the corridor. That's kind of what we had expected. And 4 to 5 additional bench areas that should be reserved for public art projects. And I think that that's a really, really cool idea to have that. That would be something that would be most likely grant funded. And that's a great conversation to keep having throughout the future to enrich the corridor. Raised platforms. This one we had a conversation at the last CEC meeting about that the raised platforms they're talking about here are platforms for public art, and there were some conversations about. Is that what it is?
Planters as well.
It says planters? Okay,
Mostly
so public
planters.
art is on the next page. All right. So the raised platforms would be for planters, and they're talking about using board formed concrete for that, so it has the like the indentation of the wood on the back side of it.
And then seating around.
And then seating, yeah.
The garden beds.
Yeah, and Mary is kind of the person who is in charge of coordination for the CEC, so she's been working very closely with the CEC on this project, and so she has the answers for the things that the meetings that I missed. So on the next page, bike racks, talking about the same number of bike racks that was in the original plan at like big time intersections and business locations that require them. That the design for those will be forthcoming as well. The enhanced intersections. So this is an idea of having interesting crosswalks, and there's something that we need to keep in mind here about whether or not MnDOT will allow us to do this. I think that they will.
I'm going to say, but we have to keep in mind that this is a public highway.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these things that I read, I no offense to them, but I really worry about some of the distractions that are going to be along that corridor. If we overdo, maybe is the word that I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what overdue means. Do we put 10 benches? Do we put 20? Do we have art every 6 blocks? I don't know what in my head I'm thinking, but I think that we have to be really careful to not cause a lot of distractions as well, because it's still a main thoroughfare.
Mm-hmm.
Is it in the middle of our downtown and our city? Yes, it is. But it is really, as we all like to say, the one way in and the one way out of this town. And that means a lot of people using the highway for a lot of different things. So that is one of the concerns as I went through and was reading some of this, is I think we have to be careful as we look at some of these things to make sure we don't, I don't want to say muck it up because that sounds bad, but just be really cautious of what we're putting in there to not really distract people from the job at hand, which is
Getting safely through
the city. You know, both for the people, the pedestrians, the bicyclists, the motorcyclists, others in cars, and just making sure that we're doing our due diligence for those people as well, because that's really what this is. MnDOT's not here to pretty it up, they're here to do a job on their highway. And so just wanted to say that I think we have to be careful about that.
I think that's an important perspective to keep bringing back into the conversation. So I appreciate that. I think that we should keep bringing that in just to find, that'll help us find a better happy medium of where we should be. In the conversation about public art here, I do think that this fits in nicely with what you just said. The CEC affirmed 10 locations, when these were locations that were in the original plan. But one of the really interesting conversations about the public arts spaces was, originally this memo said that there should be raised platforms for this public art, and then a lot of the people on the CEC were like, but if I made a piece of public art, I wouldn't want it on a pedestal. I'd want it to be on street level. And so this conversation changed to say, okay, so how about public art? Why don't we identify 10 places where it could be, prep those spaces so that they could have the amenities necessary to have art on them, like having the electricity at, present there for lighting or whatever would be possible, and then have it be flat. So then it doesn't cause any problems, and it actually functions as a sidewalk space or as a public space until the time comes to, that it's identified, hey, that would be really nice to have there. We've got a really killer idea for that, and the community is on board with it. So that's what's identified within this, with those 10 locations. I think that's really good. And also they have a public art policy suggestion in this section as well, where they say that, hey, if we're going to have locations that could be used for public art, it makes a ton of sense to have a policy that oversees that, the installation of that art and the selection of that art, so that we don't just have like somebody coming and saying like, I've got a giant banana that I want to have be public art. Might be kind of cool. Use it like a slide. So that's the conversation about public art. I really appreciate that the CEC was taking this tack on it and not saying like, we affirm that we need public art. They're saying we affirm that there are 10 locations where public art could be used, and that the city needs to create a policy that oversees the installation and the jurying of that art, so that it is something that is seen as beneficial by the community in those areas. So that's that section. Gathering spaces, they identified the three places that we that were part of the plan. The library, Old Gunflint entrance, Visit Cook County area, the curved stone walls that are in front of the library, creating that as kind of like a little picnic area. The community connection space between the rec park and North House, and Third and Third, which is in front of the dentist's office, because that little weird triangle end is going to get closed off, and that creates a space there that could be used for a little gathering space on that side of town. And those are the three things that they identified there. There's a couple of ideas in that section as well. The entrance to the rec area, we'll get into this more when we talk about the cost sharing. But this calls for a new sign at the rec area, and they basically defer to the park board. The park board's got more experience with that. The park board has more ownership in that. The park board has already been looking at some designs and has made has feelings about a couple of designs that have been shown. Part of the plan was ADA access to the pharmacy, so having like a concrete ramp to get up from street level to the front of the pharmacy building, and the data signage, yes, that makes a ton of sense. Kiosks and wayfinding. This one is really interesting too. They basically say that any wayfinding or interpretive signs that we have should be a part of this overall feel of how we want the corridor to feel, how we want the city to feel. That goes all the way back to the first conversation about how we're establishing, what did they say, the design concept, having those elements be a part of the kiosks and be a part of the interpretive signs as well. Some people call this branding. I think that we pretty much already know what our brand is as far as the lake, the lighthouse, the Sawtooth Bluffs. So those are elements that still have to be developed. But the CEC says that it makes sense to develop a community interpretive plan and a wayfinding plan. How are we going to get people around town? How are we going to communicate to people where things are within the boundaries of what MnDOT can allow us to do? So that's a good suggestion, I think. And they call for bold drive-by directions for vehicles and more detailed pedestrian-oriented structures with interpretive panels. And there's a couple of designs for that as well when we get into that.
When are we gonna be able to see some of this stuff?
I think relatively soon.
There's some graphical renditions of some of this that we've got available. You can look on our website to look at it. I don't think it's ready for a full-on presentation to the council, but that'll be soon, probably January. I think we'll probably come back and spend a significant amount of time looking at some design. And I think it'll be a little bit easier to have the conversation that Kelly started when we can look at some of this stuff. It's more of a visual conversation. So.
Yeah, and CJ's going to come back to that conversation, I do believe, if we want him. And then the last section is, why are we doing this? And so they basically identified all the different elements that have played into the design of the Highway 61 project, and the different considerations that we have economically, socially, and functionally for this project. So that's the memo that they gave us. I would encourage you to read it. Read it thoroughly. I've seen Kelly making comments here. I think that that's really awesome. The comments that you make on this are things that we can bring back to that larger conversation on design concept and how and where we're going to place things, and then we go from there. And then there's the conclusion. It shows all the people that worked on it. So that is the result of the CEC's work, and I think that they did a pretty good job of summarizing what we asked them to summarize. So, yeah. So if anyone has any comments or questions about that, we certainly can handle them. Otherwise, we can move on to the budget conversation and the local participation part of this project, which is kind of the big chunk of it, if you ask me.
Well, I just want to make it clear that, I think it's important that, we give credit to the CEC for the work they put in on this, because we've asked them to, perform this function on our behalf. It's not the only part of this project that we have to consider. Obviously, the paramount issue with us when we started this project was to try to address the issues of safety in that corridor, and I think, that still will be the primary driver. And these types of amenities that we have the opportunity to put into our the area outside the driving area of the right-of-way are also important assets that are going to be part of this city's downtown and its corridor of the highway, for the next 50 years. So, I keep saying we need to do this right. We need to make sure we've got the right balance, we've got the right understanding. We're trying to make sure that we're addressing the needs and that that have been identified. So,
Yeah.
We've got a challenge ahead of us, but I think that this is a good starting point to start to address these amenities that we've talked about and have been discussed for a couple of years.
I agree.
So, I appreciate the work that the CEC has done.
Very good. Should we talk about some numbers?
Yes.
Yeah,
All right, so let's talk about this.
interested in that.
So a few things about the numbers before we get too deep into them. There are a number of different funding sources that are going into this project. I believe that the the running total for the MnDOT project is something in the neighborhood of $12 million or something like that.
Yeah.
And there's a certain number of that the city is going to be responsible for, that has to do with a lot of the things that are on this last page. It says Highway 61 budget, city budget.
Can I ask a question about these, the way these are laid out?
Maybe
Yeah.
just, can I give you a quick tour of what these things are? Because there's 3 different spreadsheets made by 3 different people trying to answer 3 different questions.
That's why I don't understand what.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the last one's the one we're going to spend time on because it's our spreadsheet trying to answer our questions.
Yes.
Okay.
But the first one is SP 160250 MnDOT Grand Marais Design. This was created by LHB, who is MnDOT's design engineer. And the question they're trying to answer is, how much money out of the $12,600,000 is MnDOT allocating to the city? So there are just portions of MnDOT's project that they allocate to the city based on different policies. So this picture is not complete of all the things that the city is going to be spending money on. It's only the things that MnDOT is doing in their project that they're allocating costs to us. So things that are actually going to be a part of their construction project that they have a policy about. So they're trying to explain themselves, and they have a couple of the things in here that we're doing of our own behalf, but not all of it. So that's the source of some of our information. But I don't think it's a very good summary, and it doesn't really help us understand what our budget is, which is kind of the question I think most people want to know. Well, what's our budget? What are we spending on this? Where's it coming from? What's it being spent on? So then we move on to the next one, which is CJ, Ani Fernendi Landscape Architects. And this spreadsheet is designed to do a full accounting of the transportation grant, the TAP money. So there's $600,000 of grant money and $150,000 of match, the match being provided by MnDOT. And this is just trying to do an accounting. So it's differentiating between those things that are eligible to spend the TAP money on and those that aren't. And then trying to add up and figure out, after we've spent the whole grant, how much is left that needs to be come up with. So it also shows a breakdown in each of the different project areas, what our current cost estimate is for their construction. So I think it's a little more useful and helps understand in a kind of a finer grained way where the costs are coming from. You can look at lighting, for instance, and see it's about $400,000 that we're going to have to spend.
Is that because of the design?
No.
No.
It's just the amount.
And as a matter of fact, it's a pretty
That's a lot of money.
well. The lighting's expensive, and most of the lights that we're including are not fancy. I'd say it's probably 2/3, 1/3 where the lights are fairly simple, and then there's only very few where we're actually trying to focus with a design effort into the lights. And you can see down here the difference in costs of what and the current count of each of those different lights, just to give people a little peek at the design, but we'll get a better peek at it later. Most of the lights that are going in are 28-foot lights. That's pretty close to the lights that are in the downtown area right now. Either the silver metal poles with the arms that are hanging out or replacing with some black fiberglass poles. Those are in that mid-20s foot lights. And then there are some other ones that are 16 feet tall that are a little bit more like these lights that are downtown, that are 16 feet tall. The design is to light intersections between 8th Avenue West and 3rd Avenue East. And there's only a few lights that are not in intersections that are trying to fill in where we thought there were gaps where people would probably want to be able to see, and we'd need some more light. It also includes taking 11 Harbor Walk lights out and replacing them with 3 16-foot lights. So we're talking about not a particularly bright, daytime sort of level light, but rather lighting that's designed for safety purposes to make sure that intersections are well lit. That we could easily spend a lot more than $400,000 if we wanted to have lights like we have downtown along the entire corridor. It would cost a lot more. If we even wanted to just do lights at the shorter intervals at intersections, we'd end up with a lot more. It's a lot of money. I knew it was going to be a lot of money. We knew it was going to be a lot of money in May when we did this exercise on the wall up here. It was clearly the biggest chunk of our budget. So it's worth spending some time understanding, but you can see where the rest of these items are coming from too. Let's just flip it over to now the last page, which is our budget. Finally, this is really the first time we've had an opportunity to look at the big picture of our budget, because so many of these things weren't designed yet and we didn't have estimates for what they were going to cost, but now we do. So I've broken down and tried to include costs from LHB's spreadsheet, costs from CJ's spreadsheet, and other costs that we know we're going to do during this project. So it includes all the things that we're calling amenities. It includes storm sewer upgrades, ones that we're doing outside of the Highway 61 right-of-way but connecting to, and ones that are happening in the right-of-way that MnDOT's going to charge us money for. It includes city utility replacement. There's a very significant sewer and water replacements happening while the highway's being torn up. It includes parking lanes that MnDOT's going to charge us for because that's what they say their policy is. It includes other, what they're saying, pro rata items, where because our share of the contract is 10% or whatever, then we're going to pay 10% of mobilization and 10% of construction engineering. I didn't made that number up at 10%, but you can see that there's quite a bit of money involved in that as well. So what's the grand total? 2.3 million is money that's being spent on things that we have to come up with.
And you're saying that's our share, right?
That's our share,
Cities.
2.3 million.
2.3, but we have to identify that we have a number of
Yep.
different sources for that money to come from, not just a general.
Right, but
So,
that's the total.
That's what the
that-
total is. Where are those funds coming from? 187,000 is money that's coming out of the general fund. 841,000 is coming out of our utility funds.
Which is something that we knew was coming.
Yep,
that
we've planned for both of those. As a matter of fact, the 187 is less than some numbers we've looked at on the general fund. 306,000 is going to come from the park capital fund, although I suspect that the $70,000 that's currently in the park entry sign, we're not going to end up spending $70,000 there, based on park board's conversations. 91,000 is actually being contributed by MnDOT, either as their share of lighting or as their 2% of project costs that they put towards public art. 600,000 is coming from the TAP grant. 50,000 we're hoping to get from IRRB to help pay for lighting, and then 240,000 is coming from the grants that we received for stormwater improvements. So there's an awful lot of different sources of money that we're bringing to bear here to come up with our $2.3 million. It's a pretty big
So-
number.
I did the math.
Yeah, so it's almost $1 million that we would get through MnDOT TAP if we got IRRB in our stormwater grant.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
close to that.
Yep.
And then the biggest single chunk of that is the utility work, which is something that we're committed to doing.
Right.
We're,
Well,
we're planning on
we're saving a lot of money by doing it. when
Having
we already
them do
have
all
it
the
dug
digging.
up.
right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the sewer line is from 8th to 3rd Avenue, so that's quite a length of line that we need to replace. It's something that we've wanted to replace for a while. It's something we looked at lining, and it just isn't a good option for that line considering its condition. So it's good timing for us to be able to replace it now. We're planning on paying cash for all of this, and we have been for years. Thinking about this as not as a borrowing, but as a cash. So we've got the money set aside to spend on this. This is the best picture we've had so far of what the budget for this project looks like. I hope that gives you some comfort that we're going to be able to pull this off. But also, we know what the levers are now. So if you're not comfortable and you want something to be different, now we know where to look and make it different, and we can talk about that.
So am I right in saying that if we look at that graph, that the stormwater is, that there's a 2 grant source or 3 grant sources plus MnDOT, right? Those right 4?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The next 2, moving to the left, park capital and utility fund, are both revenue producing. Right, that's
Departments.
departments.
Yep.
Yeah.
So really the general fund, which would be from the levy,
Mhm.
right, is as projected right now, is $187,430.
Yeah.
Would be the city's contribution out of the levy. And that would basically, that's our commitment via the tax levy as far as like how people see a direct impact in costs. But that gets us a $12.6 million project, right?
That's
in
one
a
way
way.
to look at it.
Well, it's definitely heavily leveraging a lot of other money.
Right.
It's our contribution towards the 12.6 million.
Yeah.
That project cost includes a significant length of highway reconstruction that's not in the city limits.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So-
Okay, I see. Right. Yeah, the 12.6 is the whole thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But looking at that 187 as well, a good chunk of that money is money that we have in reserve.
Well, we've already levied it. Yeah.
It's already,
So-
we've been planning ahead for this, so that this is,
Oh, yeah.
this is cash we
No,
have
I
in
know.
hand,
I
so
just-
it's not gonna
I
impact
just
the levy
wanna-
going forward.
Right.
So it's not like in 2020, 2021, we're gonna turn around and tell taxpayers, no, we need money for this, we've already got it.
It's already there.
Yep, it's already there.
Set
And that's-
aside,
And
per
that's
se.
including, if you look at the budget breakdown that we've included, 2020, 2021, like, that's included in there.
Yep.
With us running an under 3%
Right,
levy for the next 2
Right.
years, is that we're gonna get this project paid for with cash, and then we're still gonna be able to keep the levy low.
When we've
So-
talked about council priorities in the past, we've set aside dollars to accomplish those priorities, and you can see in the one spreadsheet, it shows that the use of council priority funds,
And a brief history on council priorities. When I was elected, there was a line item in the budget that was just called council priorities. And what it was kind of used for in the past, and what it, it still is, it's what it's used for, is kind of I wouldn't say a slush fund, but a place in the budget for unforeseen things that pop up. That then there's money budgeted so that those projects can be handled if there are opportunities the city want to.
Yeah, I'd call them
wanna pursue.
foreseen things. I mean, when you're talking about priorities, that council's always had the few projects that they're interested in making progress on, and we need to have that money to help move us down the road on those things.
Right. So having that money and then having that be applied to a project like this is entirely appropriate.
it's almost like you're funding your depreciation, per se, right?
You view it like that.
well, you anticipate that there's going to be some expenses for particular projects that the council's identified as priorities. We don't necessarily, we have a general idea what those might be, but we don't have a specific idea, so we set aside some money to make sure we have resources available to accomplish those things. And obviously, the Highway 61 project was one of those council priorities. We didn't know what we were going to need to spend for that, because we weren't anywhere along, this far along in the planning process, but we knew that it was going to cost us something. So we had funds that were available to use.
So here's the question that we've got tonight. So we've got this city budget in front of you. We understand what the funds are that we have going into the project. We understand that we're leveraging city money against a lot of grant money. Does the council feel comfortable with this budget? Is this something that we feel comfortable with, understanding that if you look at the pro rata items and construction engineering and such at the bottom, that there will be mobilization expenses and there will be construction and administration expenses for all the sections that the city is going to be paying for. Those things are built into the project. Storm sewer projects are monies that are coming that are up and over and above what we got grant money for, that the city will be putting money in for, and then some work to be done at the third community space that adds us up to that $187,430 number.
Well, I mean, I like that we're seeing more refined numbers. I mean, this is moving another step along from where we were before. We had some very general dollar amount for broader, even broader categories of items that we're going to be trying to do during this project. This is helpful to start to move that conversation to more into more specifics, and I like what has been put together here.
think this is helpful in understanding where the resources will come from to complete these components of the plan.
I think it's good information. I think something like this maybe would even be appropriate on our website, so that, a lot of times people will talk to you and ask questions, and if I'm not carrying it with me, especially being a finance person, I got a lot of numbers swimming in my head. The other thing that I have a question on is, when were these numbers put together? Like, how recent are?
Last week.
Okay. Sometimes as bids and things go out, things change. Like, somebody can quote you a price in 2017, now all of a sudden steel has spiked and blah, 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 your things rise. So that's why I asked.
These are engineers' estimates, so nobody's bid anything, and when the bids come back, then that's a whole new conversation.
Because that could change.
Engineers'
things.
estimates are trying to account for construction
Yeah.
inflation between now and when they bid the project.
Okay.
They're trying to account for a lot of things, but with a project this complicated, you just don't really know what situation contractors are going to be in terms of how busy they are, or in terms of supplies and
That's
pricing.
why I
And
just
so there's
wondered
all kinds
how-
of variables out there still. This is just a budget. This is just a way for us to try and understand what's happening. It's not a bill yet.
No, I
So,
recognize that,
yeah.
but I know budgets can, this looks nice, it could all change
It could
next
certainly
week,
change
next month.
if
It could
bids
be
come
better
in.
in our favor,
Yeah.
and it could be way worse.
It could
so.
be either, and it doesn't
Okay.
usually get a lot better.
No, it doesn't.
When you see that sort of thing. But it doesn't get a lot worse either in terms of things that we haven't included. There's very few things that we've talked about doing that aren't accounted for in here, but there are a couple. So the 10 spaces for public art, there's not 10 places with a foundation and wiring. I think there's 3 that are in this design. The enhanced crosswalks, there isn't really an enhanced crosswalk built into this design because LHB and MnDOT aren't sure if they've got a good way to build them that would be worth us investing in. The parking area at 3rd and 3rd is not funded. The design for the space at 3rd and 3rd is really all inside of the MnDOT right-of-way. It's not in the city street right-of-way. So there's still a chunk of city street that's going to get dead-ended. And we've got some drawings about how that might end up. We don't have to do that now. We don't even have to ever do it, really, but I think that deserves more conversations, particularly with the affected people and what their participation ought to be in a project like that, if we're going to end up building a parking lot there, and what they'd like to see out of it. So we can spend some more time on that. The park entry sign, like I said, it's not done yet. The park looked at a design that was quite a bit more substantial and has backed off from there. And I suspect they're going to back off a little bit more before we're done. We still don't even know what MnDOT's going to allow inside versus out of the right-of-way. The storm sewer, right now, stormwater quality treatment line item is an absolute guess based on an idea that we're going to build some $20,000 underground tanks that allow us to capture sediment. But we don't have them located or designed yet, so that's something that we can make some choices about still. We don't have to build them all. We don't have to build any of them, but that's something that our stormwater management plan asks us to consider. The utilities are our biggest wild card here. The utility funds have been funding their depreciation, so that's how they will be paying for this, and that's how we're trying to pay for all of our projects is some combination of cash, some combination of borrowing, and we're just going to do cash for this. So the scope's not going to change dramatically unless we decide we want to do dramatically less of something here. The prices, there's still a lot of variables out there, so that's a good thing to just keep in mind.
Can you lay out the timeline to give us a better understanding of where this is today and where it moves and when we start construction? When do we have to start making decisions about the detail level of this?
So a lot of these decisions are moving ahead, and you never have to make any choices. If you like what's moving ahead, that you don't have to change any of it. The schedule is really frustrating This, I mean, literally, this stuff was put together last week because I sat down with LHB and CJ for 5 hours last week and looked at, hey, we've got some lighting information for you, and they wanted me to say everything's okay. And I'm thinking, what?
That's not how it works.
I mean, the council hasn't even seen a budget yet. I can't tell you anything. We haven't talked to the community about any of this yet. The reason they asked me that ridiculous and unreasonable question is because MnDOT's schedule is, we're done. They're putting their plans together. They're going out for bid in April. And
But that bid is only for the construction portion of the project. It's not for these amenities.
no, it's for most of this.
Yeah, 'cause a
Most
lot
of
of-
this is included in their contract, and so they need to have it done. So we're put in a pretty untenable situation there. The best we can do is rely on the design work that's happened, look at budgets and make sure we're okay with it, and then spend the next couple of months looking at the design, getting comfortable with it, putting it out in the front of the public, talking to people about it. It's not markedly different than things we've been showing the public for years now. So I don't expect that there's going to be a need to change a lot of things. But if we look at this and say, well, MnDOT's got 48 lights planned, they've got them designed, it's in their contract, they've bid it out, and in July we say, you know what, we only want 38 lights, then I'm assuming we're going to be able to go through a change order process and reduce that out of there. To go back after now and ask MnDOT to add anything to this is going to be exceedingly difficult.
So
To
how
say
does-
that
how
we
does
don't
it-
want to spend that in the future, I think we'll have more
I
options
don't know how
there.
much we'll have to add, but there might be things we want to take away.
It's possible there's things you want to take away. I mean, I don't know if that you want to, because I think this is really very similar to what we talked about in May and what we've talked about before, and it's based on a public process and a design with a group that you've met with. So the reasoning that you might want to take something away, I think, is probably more based on this, the budget. Are you comfortable with how this money's being spent, or would you prefer to not invest in some of these things? And
Is the design you said on our website?
we've got pieces of it. So there are some picture files that we've got of some of the design elements. I don't think it's ready yet to have like the whole thing start to finish like we've showed people in the past that includes all these elements drawn into it. So I'm hoping that that's something that we can do in January, is go back and just take everybody through the whole thing one more time. And
Well, I think it would be
Understand
nice
it.
to do that, especially since we're really moving forward now, to be able to say, okay, because I haven't looked at it since last May, and to look at it again and say,
Yeah.
all right, now knowing what we know with some of these numbers, and are some of these things making sense? And
yeah,
being able to say, you know what, before it's gonna cost us money to make any changes. Change orders, typically, if we take stuff away, it's good for us, but it would be nice to do some of that now in case something jumps out at us that for some reason didn't then.
Right.
You know, we are into a month of winter. Granted, we don't have much snow, but there are some things that will start coming to mind, I think, as we move through our seasons.
yeah. And even last week, I still had questions for them, you know, specific location questions about where things are going to be and how they're located, and they're not done. So it's really an incredibly tight timeline
Yeah.
of getting their design finished and out to bid, and we don't want that to be interrupted. So we're forced to act this way instead, which is make sure. Well, we're trying to drill down a little bit each time, right? And as long as people are still comfortable with this, then that's good. There's no big red flags. We won't go and try to make drastic changes. And then in January, we'll look at the entirety of the design and try to understand where these elements are and what they look like, and you know, we'll show that again to the public and have people get a chance to get comfortable with what's actually going to be built.
You know, to me, one of the most obvious areas is that issue of lighting, when we have, you know, kind of a dollar amount spelled out in here, and CJ has put together, you know, work in terms of design and that, and the CEC is kind of working with CJ to refine that. I mean, how do we get that conversation to be solidified so that MnDOT can go out based on something that that we're all supportive of, and that's just, to me, the most obvious of all of these elements, but my guess is that there may be other elements like that too, that we need to have that kind of a clear understanding as to what our expectation is before MnDOT goes out on
But
bids, because I don't think we have any of those clear expectations that.
What is MnDOT's standard? They don't even really have a good, clear, easy answer for that. They don't really have one, and it's more context based. And we've heard 4 or 5 different answers from them over the course of this design work in a couple of years of what they're going to build, if they're going to build anything, what their financial participation is going to be. They're saying now this is the definitive. But you can see the process they achieved was they hired another engineering firm to go out and do a study for a lighting design. That's available for people to look at, that at least talks about the lighting level, so that it's trying to accomplish what we asked for, which is fairly minimal, focused on intersections.
But that's only one component of what we've asked for in lighting, and that, that meets the lighting requirement. We've also talked about the aesthetics, we've talked about the scale and color and.
Yeah, and we're taking care of most of that stuff. I think that.
How do we know that?
Yeah, I don't know how we communicate that yet, and we need to be able to do that. What I've seen doesn't tell that picture very well, and it's hard for folks, I think, to be able to look at what the MnDOT's lighting design is now and have a real clear understanding what that it's going to be.
I mean, even with the lighting, with the like the Kelvin ratings of the lights, I mean, and the response that's getting, which isn't positive, I mean, do we not? Yeah, it would be really helpful.
Well, some things are easier to change, than others. What is that light is, I think, still a fairly easy thing to change. What is
where is that light?
Where is the light, and the characteristics about how tall and how bright it is are what's really getting fixed in stone by MnDOT's project, design process moving forward.
And then this also is, I think it's important to keep in mind that this budget is, I view this budget pretty similarly to how we set the preliminary levy, in saying that all the stuff that we want in the project, more or less, is in this budget. And there are definitely places where we could go above that. Like if you look at the page before, the total upcharge that, for one of the suggestions for lighting is $107,000. Well, we pretty much told CJ that we're not really super interested in that. But
who has? The CEC?
CEC.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing I guess I'd like to see more of is, like, what is that stuff? I mean, I know that we can take their recommendations, but I mean, shouldn't we get the final say on that, or
you
the
will,
public?
and you'll get to see those too.
Or
No, they're just going to send you a bill a year later, and it's
Or
not.
I mean, is that I don't want to waste their time either to have us, go against everything they say. But it seems like there's obviously 2 different things happening there, and what are those? And maybe it is a lesser amount, but it is those that whatever that $107,000 upgrade is.
Well, it says it's metal pole to wood pole upcharge for $107,000.
Well, but I'm saying, we don't have any idea.
Yeah,
Again,
that's being done in the
what
document.
is-
What you're saying.
Right. We
What's
don't know
a
what
metal
that
pole
is.
look like? What's a wood pole look like?
Right.
Why would we do
Yeah.
one or the other?
And maybe we go with less lights. I mean, it's basically $1,000 more per light is what that translates out to, based on if you look at the
10.
no.
It's $107,000.
Well, it's 3,000 per light, maybe.
Oh, 3,000. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
But we don't know what we're looking at, and so all I'm saying is, and maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Like, oh yeah, that's stupid. Why would we want to put wood posts in? But because we don't know what we're looking at, and we don't know exactly, we haven't seen the lighting scheme,
No. So
that we don't. It just is.
Tonight-
We don't. So I don't know if that number, it's like. So that number that's plugged in is the 405, not showing the $107,000 upcharge.
right.
And maybe, I don't know, I mean, maybe it's like, no, maybe we need that $107,000 upcharge in the lights, but there's something else in here where that, so like Jay's saying, I don't know, I guess not having enough information, the numbers, this is super helpful, to be able to have all this.
And this is the
compared
level
to
that
where
we're at right now. I mean,
Well-
when we start, if this gives us numerical
Well,
expectations.
somebody decided that we don't need a $107,000 upgrade on lights. How did they make that decision?
I'd say more than somebody, but it's not decided.
Not
right?
somebody, but
What, it's just a budget that's put together. So there's 100 different choices that were made that you haven't been
Right.
fully involved
Which
in
is good.
to get there.
Right.
The next step that we need to do is the visual part of it. So this is our first crack to, I think, really get a quality look at the numbers side of it and understand the whole picture about numbers, which we haven't been able to do
Yeah.
yet. So that's where we're at. That then looking at the design, which although we have the CEC letter in your packet, and we kind of needed to at least know that what CJ and MnDOT were doing was okay with what the CEC thought to move forward on MnDOT's side of things, but you still haven't really had a chance to look at the design that the CEC's put together.
No,
and I think we want to spend as much time on that as we would do on the numbers, but we just don't have it ready yet. So, and the only reason we're doing this now, I mean, when they told me last week, here, this is it. Is this okay? Can we go forward? And I thought, that's so. I don't even want to put this on this agenda because we had other big things going on, and you haven't had any time before now. I mean, to drop this on you and have 3 or 4 days to look at this, and then that's not fair either. Next week we said it's going to be a 10-minute meeting, so it didn't seem like a good time. And then January, the first meeting, I thought the most realistic and fair to you way to deal with this would be to wait till the end of January to come together and look at a big picture of the budget and the design and everything else. But that's not really an option. So here we
Well,
are with what we've got.
And I guess I'd like to see the design, because as I take a step back and look at some of these things, and if I'm reading this right, the design basically goes from 8th Avenue West to the New Gunflint Trail.
Yeah.
105 trees. I'd like to see where they're going to put 105 trees in a mile and a half. That's a lot of trees on Highway 61. 15 benches. So we're talking about a bench every 10th, of that mile and a half, a 10th of a mile. So I think that we kind of need to look at 12 bike racks in a mile and a half. I know we have people that bike, but those are the things that I want to kind of look at to say, okay, with the design that's there and with what's here, are there things, maybe it all fits and maybe it's going to look great, but are there other things that maybe we cut back and say, do I feel okay that we have 187,000, like you said, that I kind of feel we would be out of our levy monies? That is a really great number. But the other thing taxpayers keep telling us is keep everything down. So I want to turn around and do the due diligence to say, do I want 105 trees in that length? Is the money enormous in a $12.6 million project? It isn't. But that's not what people are telling me. They aren't saying keep the percentages in line. They're saying, please be careful of how you're spending my money. And I think that we need to go back to that design and look at these things in a real picture and say, do we need a park bench every 1/10 of a mile?
I'll go back to my perspective of this budget, which is to view it as similarly to the preliminary levy. Do we feel comfortable with these levels? If
Right.
we feel comfortable
Yep.
with these levels, then we can move on to that design level, understanding that these are the amounts that we're expecting to spend. And then we have the ability to cut back on those things, seeing like, well, we don't need 105 trees, so let's subtract some
Yes.
money out of that, and then that would free up more money for other things, or else it would
Right.
bring the overall cost of the project down. So with that said, do we feel comfortable with these numbers as far as they've been laid out? 187,430 coming from general fund, 841,000 coming from the utility fund. Round 300, probably less, because I doubt that the park board is going to be spending all that money on their sign from the park board, and then the rest coming from the granting agency.
I'll say this, and don't get me wrong, Jay, this is really good information, and I appreciate what's been put into it. What I'm saying is now I want to see the design with what we've kind of preliminary budgeted to say, is this really what we're looking at? Are we going to say, God, no, we want 20 more benches in, and 400 more trees in, or are we gonna cut it back? And I'm being obviously obnoxious for a point, but I can't say that I'm comfortable because I haven't seen the design to really put it in my head. Are they good numbers, and is this great information to have? Yes, for me, absolutely. Am I comfortable yet? When I can look at the design and put this into a schematics of this is what's gonna get done and the scope of it, then I'll decide if I'm comfortable. And truthfully, it's gonna be the people in the public coming back and telling me whether they think I should be comfortable and they're okay with it, or are they, because I'm getting phone calls and emails.
I think what's gonna happen here, when, these are projected numbers, when you start letting out bids and start getting hard costs, you have 10% overrun, 20% overrun, we don't know. If that happens, then you're gonna have to look at some of these amenities, or some of the, you're gonna have to look at areas where
Yeah.
you can either spend more money or get the project into a budget that we're looking at now. And that might be a decision at that time then to say, hey, look, what are some of these things we have here that maybe we're not gonna be doing right now, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, in a perfect world, this is fine, but we all know when you start building and constructing and digging and getting, you know, you've got a lot of utility work to do here, and these are engineers' estimates, and I'm probably positive that they've probably bumped these numbers up a little bit, but we don't know exactly what's gonna happen until we get bids and we get solid numbers. And then plus, projects always cost more than what the bids are. I mean, there's always things where there's a lot of unforeseen things. The DOT has a lot of unforeseen things in this project that they're gonna have to deal with. But I think at that time, then we're gonna have to be more, you know, conscious of, okay, where are we gonna get that extra money? How are we gonna proceed with some of these amenities? Maybe we fit the amenities into what we actually have money for. What do we have,
33,000.
733,000 that's guaranteed? Grant money, basically, is that,
That, I think 600 is the better way.
600 is guaranteed, right?
That's the grant money
Okay,
that's
so then
paying for
maybe
some of those
we're
things.
working with that guaranteed money, and maybe we have to start focusing on that number, depending on what happens over here with some of these construction costs. I mean, it's an
Well,
ongoing
in a
thing.
way, that's kind of what we did with those charts over on the wall there, is we started with the TAP money, which was the 600,000, and we said, well, there's city money and other money that we just don't have even identified. But that was even such a broad brush of understanding of what the project was. We didn't have this kind of level of detail. And I mean, I like the fact that we're finally having some numbers that we can think are fairly close to a starting point for a conversation. And, you know, whether we end up doing all of this or whether we make adjustments to it, now at least we can have that conversation. I think I mean, as you say, we have to blend these dollars with the design and make sure that it works, because, you know, we haven't done that yet. You know,
Well, it's not that no work has been done on that, though,
No.
right? You just haven't had
No.
a chance to participate in a lot of it.
we haven't done that.
And the public at large hasn't had a participation level in that. I mean, there's been 50 people that have put dozens and dozens and dozens of hours into this. There's at least 5 more that are going to have to put a dozen hours into this.
Yeah.
And then hopefully there's a few dozen more out in the public that at least want to spend a half an hour on this and you know, get a comfort level and understanding what's going on.
Well, and thank you again for your time pushing them, because I realize 5 hours in a day with everything else we have going on is,
That was,
I can't imagine anybody
Sounds exciting
really
to me.
wants to do that.
I didn't mind it until they were trying to make me tell them this is okay, which seems kind of silly to me, the unreasonableness of it. We've been doing this for 4 years, and really we've been talking about this, I'd say since I got here in 2001. So, I mean, that council back then said crosswalks on Highway 61 is something that they're concerned about. So, I'm just ready for this thing to get going.
Yeah.
So, I guess looking at it in that way, I think what would be so did I hear right that the CEC laid out 10 areas for, well, that is
10
it the public?
potential, right?
They looked at
10.
and they're just a dot on a map that says yes, that'd be a
Right.
good spot.
So I guess all I'm wondering is if we look at it like Jay was saying, to look at it similarly to how you would do I guess we're not stuck by raising what the cost would be if instead of 3 that are plugged into your budget, right?
Well, that LHBs and CJs actually put in the design. Yeah.
There's only 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's all I guess I'm wondering. I mean,
Do we put that additional
do you
expense
put more in? And not saying that it's all going to happen. I mean, and I wonder what, or it doesn't, you know, because I'm interested in like how, you know, each one of these things, what they, you know, if you add public art, like what's the added cost moving forward to having a piece of public art, right? So ongoing. Once the project is done, everything is up, all the lights are great, whether it's 40 or 400. That, you know, obviously lights need maintenance, they need bulbs changed, they need things dealt with. So we know that the more lights we put in, right, the linemen are going to be busier maintaining that moving forward. Same with trees. More trees we put in, that takes more time to mow around or weed whip around or whatever. So we have those types of costs, not just like right now, but moving forward. So I don't know how in the world, if we talk to Lenny or what, or between Lenny and Dave, in how we address some of the decisions that we can make. Again, this number is good. It's nice to be able to see all this stuff. But then looking beyond that, like, because we should probably look at what all of this is going to cost moving forward. And those decisions are, you know, we don't want to put something in and then just like let it go to hell because we don't want to put the money into it to, you know, to keep it maintained. We're going to maintain it, which means it's going to cost us more.
Would this exercise be handy to take a look at this? I mean, I'm hearing all these statements about these numbers specifically. Would it be more helpful for us to look at this at a like the level of being guidelines on the future expenses, so we can bring this knowledge of what these numbers are to the conversation about design, to the conversation about where the amenities are going to be, to the conversation about what are the potential dangers and risks of expense that come with these different amenities and these different projects? Is there any action we need to take on this tonight, or
Nope.
is this something? This
No.
is something that we just need to converse about amongst ourselves
Yeah.
and understand whether or not this is what we want to bring forward.
And I mean, the conversations you've already had, that was my goal for the night, is just to get this out there, to have you have a chance to mess around with it a little bit, talk to each other about it, understand what our next steps are.
Can you explain what the process is? So you're saying that MnDOT wants to go out on bids. Will they be bidding out things like the lighting, the trees, that stuff? And if are they doing it based on this information here, the 105 trees? And,
Yes,
but-
yes. So back up to, we had, in participation with MnDOT a few months ago, hired, well, more like 5, 6 months ago, maybe now, maybe it was more than that even, hired CJ and LHB to work on this design on our behalf. And the product that created was something that MnDOT puts into their plans that they're bidding out. So that's what's being finalized right now. Still not done, but the intention is all the work that's being put into this, what we're calling amenities, is things that are going to actually be put into MnDOT's plan if they're in the right of way. If they're not in the right of way, and there's a few spots where they're not, then we're going to be making separate plans. So if you think about the community connection, for instance, we've got that built into our budget here, so we understand how we're going to pay for it. But MnDOT's not going to build it because it's half in and half out of their right of way, and the half that's out is on the park property, and MnDOT wants absolutely nothing to do with park property because of the funding sources we've used previously there. So we'll be receiving our own separate set of plans for that from LHB and from CJ that we can bid out and construct in 2019. There's a couple of little exceptions like that, but otherwise, almost everything here is something that MnDOT is going to be building on our behalf. So at some point, they will be presenting us with a contract that formalizes our cost participation with them. And it'll be based on a budget like this, hopefully a little more finely developed, but including all the things here that they say that they're going to be doing and that we're going to be paying for.
So if MnDOT bids out a project that includes 105 trees, and we at some point decide that we only want 90 trees, we identify where those trees are, in change order. What, I mean, is it a simple thing, or is it you know, how,
Depends. So it's always better to change our mind before the design is done. We're almost out of time with that, so before the bid is done would be even better. If it's after the bid is done, before construction, or if they've had to order anything, or, you know, if we say we want 100 lights, and then the bid is done, and it's awarded, and they order 100 lights, then that change order is not easy. Still money savings, but not as much as we could have the earlier we make those decisions.
I imagine things like curb cuts for crosswalks and lighting are much harder to change than like a tree, right? Where
Right.
a tree is,
When you're talking about curbs, think back in time to when they were here and asked you to approve the layout.
right.
That's done.
Yeah.
Nobody's changing any of that anymore. And you know, MnDOT is moving forward with that. They're pretty well done with that side of the design. So now it's just a question of some of these features and the number of them, more than the location, but just do we want that one or not want that one?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
MnDOT, in their communication with businesses in Grand Marais and in curbing that you brought up, they've hired an assessor that has been into most of the businesses that I know of in 2 occasions to assess property that we own out in state right away. And they're supposed to be getting back to us on numbers, and we have received nothing.
To purchase
To
your
purchase
land.
or to whatever they're doing. There seems like there was a big push to get something done, and now everything's backed off. So I hear them moving ahead with bidding and moving ahead with things. I think they need to
follow up on
communicate what they're doing with the businesses along the corridor. I would like to see that get taken care of first.
that. We
With
can
the-
certainly ask them.
That's my situation at the gas station, and I think it's the same with everybody else. I don't think anybody's heard anything back from MnDOT.
I think they've talked to everybody.
They've talked to everybody, and they've assessed.
We haven't heard back from them.
Okay, so I think maybe a shout out to them to see what the time frame is on that type of stuff.
Yeah, we can ask them.
Yeah.
I don't think that they feel like they're behind schedule on that, because that would make a huge difference in their bidding schedule if they didn't think they could get that done. It's one of the reasons
Well-
why they have to start so early with the layout, is
And all
because they
those,
want to go
it's a
through that.
negotiating thing, so, I mean, and all those things, I mean, you know, we have to, it needs to be done, so that the people involved are either okay with it or not okay with it, or it progresses into more of a legal dispute. I mean,
Yeah.
in some situations, it may be like that.
I think that in a project this size, that it's inevitable that there will be a few like that. So, but we can ask them for more information about it anyway, just an update on what's going on. Earlier, a few months ago, we heard some feedback when those folks were actually in town about the message that they were communicating in a really inappropriate ways sometimes. And there were some folks that were getting kind of scared about what was going on. And so we also kind of fed that back to MnDOT and said, you can't have your people coming in giving the impression of a business owner that their parking lot's going to be taken away for 2 years or 5 years, because that's what the construction.
Well, it's the leases that they want us to sign for them.
And you know, that's one thing to have that document, but that's not what's actually going to. They're not actually going to dig up somebody's parking lot for 5 years and not replace it. That most of the time that's going to be available for somebody to use, and they just need to do a better job of communicating.
Well, that's
about
why I
that.
bring it up, because I
Yeah.
have maps that show what areas of my property in particular, and I've seen other people's maps. They want us to sign a 3-year easement for construction equipment, or so on or so forth, and it does pretty much eat up a lot of a person's driveway. And I don't think there's very many of us that are gonna sign something like that. I'm just putting that out there. I think they need to get their homework done right now as they move ahead with this. You know, instead of putting that off to the side, thinking everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah, they're not. So they've
That's my
got
concern.
5 different tracks going on at the same time, and this is one of them. And this, they have to do this for every one of their projects, so they've got quite a mechanism in place. But if we're not hearing anything, we're just wondering what's going on there, then we'll ask them for some more information.
Well, just feedback that business owners are concerned
Getting nervous. Yeah.
and want to have those discussions.
The experience that I've had talking with those guys when we bring forward concerns from the community like that, being like, hey, people are starting to get nervous about this, they usually respond pretty quickly. So unless they don't have anything to respond to, that's really an open question. of whether or not-
MnDOT's a huge organization, right? And the folks that we're talking to that are doing the project management and running the design are not the same folks that go out and do the property acquisition stuff. And so these property acquisition people, we've never met before, they show up in town, they do their thing. They've not been in communication with some of the other design pieces, so that it's more of a, we'd just like to know what's going on here situation. Because I think they can do that for you.
So bringing it back to the numbers, do we want to just proceed with understanding that this is information to arm ourselves with when we go forward in the design conversation? Or how do we want to proceed with this?
Well, I would hope that maybe, Mike, you could prepare us for the next step in this process so that we can be engaged about those component amenities that we think that we need to be more clear with MnDOT about, especially the lighting and the trees that have been brought up, and then there probably are other items, but they may not be as major as those two items.
I think it's good to have I'm happy to see this.
Is it, so this is helpful information. We've got all that stuff there. I would say that it makes the most sense for us to study this information, to understand it, so that when we do have the design conversation in January, then we can bring this information to that conversation, and then be more ready to realistically look at what are the amenities that we actually need. Do we have them at the right levels? Are the things we need to add to the things we need to subtract? Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah. If we can all agree to stop using the term amenities.
What else do you want us to call it? Stuff?
Well, amenities, in my opinion, is a word that MnDOT engineers use to not have to do things they don't want to do. A parking lane is an amenity in their mind. It's not a luxury any more than a 13-foot lane versus a 12-foot lane is a luxury, or a center line stripe is a luxury. It's just a design feature that's intended to accomplish a goal.
Design features, components, whatever.
I like to call them that because it's entirely up to your own judgment about which ones you want to pay for and which ones you don't. I just don't like to use MnDOT's language, which I think is designed to devalue some of them without really thinking about the goals that the community asked for to be accomplished.
Design features.
Yeah, design features.
Does that sound good? Do we have a bit of a? What do you want to contribute? Is it about CEC stuff, or?
I just would, without due respect, ask that the council consider maybe a joint working session with the CEC. So
I think it'd be great to have them come with.
everybody can have this dialogue together and understand where each other are coming from.
Yeah, when we start getting more into
If it's
design.
possible that we can schedule it that way.
I think that's.
Can you tell me where 105 trees are going, Mary? And I'm not trying to be a snot.
That's for the conversation later. The design conversation.
That isn't the number that I've seen before, so I'm
77 is usually the
interested
number I've
also.
seen.
in
77.
77 is the number I saw.
When it,
No, you saw that number right.
Really?
And you saw that number right.
Yeah, I saw. There are two different places in the plan. One says 105, one is 77.
Which is why we need the visual
where the
components.
dollar signs are, it says 105.
Yeah.
That's what I look at.
But they're smaller trees. The 77 are bigger.
Where the dollar signs are, where are the finance girls reading?
Well, I feel like we have put together some good information in that conversation. There will be lots of questions to come. If you do have questions, please bring those up to Mike so that we can dig up some answers before the next meeting that we have on this.
And this is intended
105
to
trees and
use
15 benches.
to communicate to the public as
I was
well.
gonna say, can you put this up next to the highway?
Yeah,
I mean, even if it's a living document,
yeah.
right?
Even if all it does is generate questions in people.
Draft.
This is really our first chance we've had to talk about the whole project cost. So
Right. Right. Yeah. No, that's
Yeah. So this is very much a draft.
yeah. Put a draft before the hyphen or after the hyphen there.
Yeah, I thought budget implied planning
that's-
document.
I'm at it.
Some people budget differently though. Okay, so with that said, thank you for that conversation, very robust conversation on
Good
that. Appreciate it.
conversation.
A lot more coming in the future on that. Excited about the stage that we're finding ourselves getting close to. The only other thing we have on the agenda is council and staff reports. We should
Thank you,
Um,
everybody.
Thank you, Anna.
just
Thank you.
a brief
Thank
timeout.
you.
Brief timeout.
Right.
Anna, check the newspaper. We've got a bunch of listings of
Planning
openings on
Commission, Planning Commission is always fun.
Planning and zoning has an opening?
Fun, I
Oh,
bet
yeah.
that is fun.
And
Lots of places to plug you in.
Anna!
You opened your mouth now.
Public Utilities Commission too.
Public utilities, yeah.
PUC?
Yeah.
So one of the things we'll have to do, Craig, we'll have to sit down and look at the breakdown of committees and things like that, because
After the first of the year, right?
after the, well, he could do it right now.
Well, we could, but
But we're all gonna redo it after the first of the year, so.
The only one that I think is imminent is that we don't have a park board representative right now. So you don't have to fill that tonight if you don't want to, if you're not sure if there's more than one person that wants it. But I know that the park board would appreciate a representative.
Are we redoing that though?
We'll take a look at
In a
it.
couple weeks?
In January, yeah, in a month.
How often does the park board meet?
Once
Is that
a month.
Once a month.
Once a month, okay.
do they have one coming up yet
I think so.
for December? Have they done December?
I don't remember.
No, I think they have one coming
I have
up
one coming up, I think.
because they were gonna change their January one, I believe.
Well, I know their November one was
Because
not
we were talking about
in
the
the
golf
regular
course
schedule.
stuff.
Usually they meet first Wednesday or first Tuesday.
Tuesday.
But they did it later in November. I'm not sure if they were also doing it later in December.
Okay, well, we can talk about that in January.
Yeah.
I just
Well,
mentioned
I
that
guess all I
because
was saying is if there isn't one, if it's already happened in December, then
let's not worry about it.
Yeah,
Until
the
January.
first
Otherwise, if
Tuesday
there
has
is
gone
one
by. That was
first of
last
the year.
night.
yeah,
Yeah.
if there isn't one, I can go if somebody tells me when it is.
Well, we could also tell them to go. Until we
Okay.
get there.
Well, that's where I was going. Is
Except in
if
January,
the council,
maybe,
you know,
or
if there's
is it
more than one
December,
person that would like to do that, you know, talk about it.
I think that might not be.
Yeah, so that's our next meeting, yeah.
Next
It sounds like
meeting.
there might be.
Next Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm gonna be flying out of town that day.
Yeah,
That's all right, it's gonna be
I'll
like a
back on
10,
the 24th.
it'll be a 5-minute.
Okay.
it's gonna be a 10-minute.
I might miss the 19th, but I'm back on the 24th, and then I'm not going anywhere. So.
Sweet,
Yeah.
great.
Second and the last Wednesday of every month.
She showed up on the second and fourth ones when they
No,
were.
I totally, on my, second time around, I totally spaced out
Oh,
the
that's
last
what it
meeting
was,
of the
'cause it
month.
was-
Somebody's like, weren't you supposed to be at city council meeting?
Oh! Yeah, so it happens.
I'm not far to run, so.
We can call you. I just need to get your phone number. Yeah. All right. So we're gonna do council and staff reports because you just got appointed. You don't have any report. Although this is a great time too to bring forward questions and things that you have wonderings about. So if you have anything, you're definitely welcome to. Otherwise, we'll move on to Anton.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
We had EDA last night, and the first unit is set out at Luton for their workforce housing, and they're working to get that buttoned up. Apparently, even if it's all done, the way the water line runs for the well there, actually it goes into the third unit first and then second first. So they actually have to get the third unit up before they can get occupancy into the first or second unit.
I'm sorry. What?
I don't know, I just learned that last night. Seems like they'd have put it maybe on the third foundation
Yeah.
first.
Can't they make the third unit the first unit? Probably not anymore.
Not now.
Probably not anymore.
That was, Mary still here?
Nope.
Of course she
John's going,
left.
Mary out.
So, but it seems like they could set the second one on the third and then hang it. But that's good. It's good that happened because there's been issues there with, digging in Cook County and slowed things down, but that's good. The if it hasn't, well, it wouldn't have happened today, I don't think, but there's the closing for the fourth house over on the Grand Marais project is set to close. And the other 4 are on the market, so, and there's a list of applicants. And so that's, so that very early into 2019, there could be full occupancy on all those projects, all those houses over there. So
Sweet.
it's cool. And I know at least one family that got one of those houses, and I ran into him at the sauna, and I didn't know that was happening, and he was super excited, and it's pretty awesome. So,
Sweet.
and golf course, we got the end of the year, well, basically the end of the year stuff with Superior National, and they met their rounds budget, and they set 12,000 rounds, and they came in like just under 12,200, so, which is great. And revenues are up because it's 27 holes all season this year, and then despite growing in and all the winter kill that everybody experienced, not just us up over the hill here, but so that was good that those numbers, now that they're fully open again, are moving in the right direction. And one of you will say something that will trigger something in my head. Oh, can we? Yeah, look at that.
Didn't need to say anything.
Tim grimacing at me is all it took. Can we? When can we start talking about? Are we going to try and set another meeting, or are we going to discuss it at one of our council meetings as far as council priorities and having some sort of work session? As far as now that we have 5 of us again, you know, basically setting what our strategic planning.
Yeah, we'll start
First
that
of the month.
in,
First meeting of the
in
month.
January.
Is
So
that
we'll be-
outside of this, right? We'd set
Yes, yeah, we'll spend a longer session or 2.
Okay.
So we'll contact you for scheduling.
Great. That's
Cool.
it.
To add on to the EDA conversation, I talked to Mary today, and it sounds like another EDA lot sold, or is selling.
Oh,
Which is
really?
Kind of exciting.
Yeah, they had
So,
there's
In the business park?
back
Yeah.
and forth there. Yeah.
so there you go.
If that actually, if they had made an offer, we'd countered, and then they countered, and then we knew, then we ended up countering again. So, yeah, I mean that's great. And yeah.
Cool.
Been a slow process.
Anyway, it is a slow process. Tim, what do you got?
Couple things. Planning Commission, Todd Smith came before the Planning Commission at our last meeting to talk about vacation rentals and how the county assessor's office is going to be dealing with them with regard to their tax classifications. Their evaluation of vacation rentals has kind of led them to believe that properties for the general part are misclassified, and the types of vacation rentals that we have, most of them fit into this 30 to 250 days of rental per year. And they have said that they're going to be changing those classifications from seasonal residential recreation to residential non-homestead, which, I mean, to most people wouldn't really make any difference or understanding of what that means. But the way he explained it is that the seasonal residential recreation properties are part of their taxes that they pay goes into a state general tax, and that money goes to the state. And where residential non-homestead properties, that money is all levied, and that money stays in the county. It doesn't go to, there isn't a general or a state general tax on that. So
the county would stand to see roughly $300,000 more per year that they would be receiving, that wouldn't be going to the state in form of general state.
And that's not
Tax.
because they're have a permit fee, right? This is just because of that.
Just a change in the classification and
For
I mean,
taxing.
And again, trying to explain that the tax structure is, I mean, even Todd, who is well-versed in it,
I don't think they got it right either. It didn't sound right
Well,
to me.
you know-
And the idea that the state tax is going to somehow be collected here instead just isn't true. The $300,000 that was being paid by those properties to the state just isn't going to be paid to anybody. And so there might be the bill might change because the classification changes. They'll have to start paying the school levies
yes.
that they don't now, but they'll stop paying the state tax. It doesn't increase the amount the county gets unless the county increases their.
Well, and I think, my take on it was that until a property owner really sees their tax bill, they won't know whether this is an advantage or a disadvantage to them.
Yeah.
And
Even
again,
after they see it, they might not be able to tell because there's so many other factors. And
Right. But the thing about this is that they're talking about implementing this come next month. So this will be put in place. It's not something that anybody, county board doesn't have to make any decisions about. We don't have to make any decisions about. It's the assessor's tax classification, and if people want to dispute that, they can challenge that with the county assessor. That's, I suppose, the process. The other kind of part of this whole conversation about vacation rentals is the county vacation rental committee, had been talking about this licensing fee to require all vacation rental properties to have a license with the county. And if with the idea that would just give the county some information about where vacation rentals are occurring, who's doing it, and give them some kind of a database of where these properties are, because the information that the assessor has only been derived from looking on websites, through advertisements, trying to track down properties that they have been able to figure out are in the vacation rental business. So we talked a little bit about, at the planning commission, about, well, why wasn't the city involved involved with the permitting. And Mike and I have been on that vacation rental committee, and really most of the discussions have circled around county issues, but we've kind of taken a more passive role, but recognize that there may be some value to the city actually joining in on their permitting process just to gather information on the vacation rentals that exist in the city, because we don't always have a very good understanding of what is going on out there. The assessor's office has done a lot of work. In fact, they identified some properties that, in fact, they had mapped them out and put little dots on the map, and there were a couple dots in places that we thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder where, yeah. So,
That's not what I thought.
no, you didn't. Oh, well, you knew. It was all. Maybe you did. I
I
don't
thought.
know. I'm not sure
like
what
it.
those dots represented, and so but I think they were surprised to planning commission members when they were showing up in the residential zone district.
Well, I think some aren't surprised because I had somebody call me on it, and I don't want to take up Tim's time, but that is a question of mine, because I can think of a property close to a rental that's probably doing things that they're not supposed to do, and the neighbor across the street is doing the right thing. And what is our policy on dealing with those people?
Well, we don't have policy. We got ordinances. So when we have evidence that somebody's not following an ordinance, we can contact them directly. Usually that's the first step. If we don't get good results, we'll send cease and desist letters. If there continues to be issues, I guess we'll have to talk about that.
Okay.
So it goes to the
And
county
specifically,
attorney.
when the planning commission was dealing with the vacation rental issue a couple years ago, we did send letters to 3 property owners that were identified as operating, and in fact, they were at our meetings and came in and, you know, made it pretty clear that they were running not vacation rental businesses. None of those, to my knowledge, today is running a vacation rental business. There may be others though. It's kind of easy
Well,
to fall between
when
the
they
cracks.
post it on Facebook,
Then it must be
Being
true.
kind of blatant. Yeah, right. Careful.
So,
Was that it?
we need
Or-
to
no,
advertise
just
it on
the other
Southern
thing
Block.
is, you know, we had a PUC meeting last week too and set rates, and we had talked about this one of our previous meetings, that we were tentatively looking at these rates, but the rates were set at the last meeting. Sewer, 2% increase in the sewer utility, 0% increase in the water utility, and a 0% increase in the electric utility. And again, because all the funds are in a healthy position, you know, the sewer, you know, recognizing that there were some specific needs there, we did increase that, but the other two funds, you know, we were satisfied that a 0% increase would allow us to still look to the future and fund the projects that we still see, you know, needing to get done, but knowing that we have reserves and that, you know, also recognize that, you know, with the Public Works Garage and the dollars that we set aside, you know, we're paying a bond for that, and those are coming out of mostly existing monies that were set aside in the utilities. So the utilities are all really healthy, and, you know, we can be thankful for that. We didn't have to levy any significant increases this year.
Cool. Kelly?
Nothing. I knew you'd fall over.
Well, you ready to really fall over? Nothing. Did you catch that? Did you catch
Tim!
I've been sick. I've been sick for like a week, so I didn't go to any meetings.
That's a capital nothing.
Yeah.
All right, we've discovered a strategy.
With just keep me
Mike
going.
and I are going to tag team on Jay.
All right. This.
Hey, you've got a meeting next week.
Yeah.
It's at 5 o'clock.
Yep.
Yep.
Right here, and we'll make it short. It'll pay bills if there are any. You'll approve salary changes for next year and the final levy, and it's all stuff that you've already really made decisions about, so it shouldn't take any time at all.
All right. Anything else? We are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Good meeting.